So the first thing I'd like you to picture is yourself going to a toy store and shopping for your child or your grandchild or a child you know, and first thinking about your intention of buying a toy for, say, a 6-year-old girl, and what kind of toy you would be looking for. And now a 6-year-old boy. How many of you, raise your hands, pictured an action or a building kit when looking for a boy? And how many of you pictured a doll or a house or a passive toy when looking for a girl? Okay, so it's probably similar, such as something like this is very stereotyped and generalized, but it's probably also very similar to what toy stores even tell you is appropriate for each gender. So this is a picture from Target in the United States. And of course, I'm talking about a Western culture where we even can look at something like this and into this step. But from a very young age, we've been trained to recognize that the pink aisle is for girls and the blue aisle is for boys. So much so that, according to Let Toys Be Toys, children can actually already associate, or they do associate color with gender at the age of 2. And of course, it's not the colors themselves that matter, but what they represent. So boys are most often targeted with toys based on action, power, and adventure, and girls are often targeted with communication, relationships, and emotional expressivity. So a little personal story for myself is when I was younger, I always wanted, or was always very excited about the prospect of remote-controlled cars, so something like this, or a helicopter, or anything like that. And I always expressed this excitement when I saw that a friend, which was usually a boy, had one. And I told this to my parents as well when I saw one, but I never put it on my wish list, which, looking back at it, is very strange because I knew that to some extent, even though I could be excited about this and this was fun, it still wasn't really for me and it was more for boys. So that I was actually in Toys R Us at one point with my parents, and I saw this car that you could sit in and drive, and it was, I think it had like a military print or something like that. And I knew it was for boys, so I asked my parents, well, why doesn't this exist for girls? But of course, why couldn't I have had that car if I had gotten it? But that's very silly. And of course, there's a lot of tangled elements that influence a child's development. But an important role, what I'm arguing is that the way children play also influences who they become and how they develop. This is because the same messages are repeated over and over again. And of course, it's logical that those characteristics that are encouraged and furthered are more likely to be continued. And this creates this continuous cycle between what is learned as a child and what is passed on as an adult. So much so that the same messages and gender roles seen in toys and children's toy advertisements are also seen in the adult world, such as the workforce. First of all, what I unfortunately forgot to skip to, this is from Let Toys Be Toys, and you can see very clear distinction between the most common words found in advertisements targeted at boys and those at girls, or at least those featuring boys most. Okay, so now back to the adult world. If I were to ask you, I'll come to those facts in a second, but if I were to ask you to picture a nurse, who would you see? Or a scientist, who would you see? We, again, we recognize these stereotypes because they are also true, unfortunately. Just like boys are not targeted with emotional expressivity with toys and don't often explore this a lot, men are very underrepresented in nurturing jobs such as teaching and nursing. And similarly, women continue to be underrepresented in STEM jobs, so that's science, technology, engineering, and math. And the U.S. Department of Commerce found that although women made up almost half of the workforce in 2011, only 24% of them held STEM jobs, but STEM jobs were made up of women. Even more so, although 50% of advanced placement calculus students in the U.S. were made up of girls, for 20 continuous years, only 17% of women, engineering majors were made up of only 17% of women. Sorry. And what's interesting is that even though we continue to move more towards equality, the Young Women's Trust concluded that young women have more stereotyped views on careers and gender than older women do. And this is also seen in toys. So toys have actually become more and more segregated, especially since the 1970s, according to Elizabeth Sweet. And it actually only was last year that Target vowed to ban all toy aisle labeling so that they actually had girls' toys labeled and boys' toys. But as you saw in the picture earlier, there's still a long way to go for it to actually stop being segregated. So here's an example from changing over time. This is Lego in 1981, and then Lego now, which has split into Lego Friends for girls, or seemingly for girls, and Lego City for boys. And you can also see a lot of difference between the two kits and what they hold. This is the Lego Friends is based on a group of girls, which they have a series about and characters, whereas Lego City doesn't involve any set characters, but rather focuses on police or action and things like that. So this change in time is partly due to the fact that platforms such as Disney Channel or Nickelodeon have allowed companies to target children as consumers directly and target audiences, or in those platforms, audiences have become smaller and smaller so that more specific audiences are being targeted. What's interesting though is that, according to Calvert, children under the age of 8 actually lack the cognitive skills to understand persuasive intent of advertisements, so that these values presented in these advertisements actually might seem like truths or honest opinions about the characteristics that we're encouraging. And this is as well, in these characteristics, they've also changed over time and actually increased in intensity and stereotyping. So for example, the concept of masculinity, which is encouraged and begins to be encouraged in young boys and of course continues in men, there's been this perception of the feminization of America recently in the US, and actually it seems like the opposite is taking place. So this is relating to toys. You can see the muscle span increasing over time. This is G.I. Joe, I think this is, yeah, G.I. Joe, becoming bulkier and more manly. And of course also in the media, more violent portrayals are more common, and video games becoming more and more realistic, normalizing this violence and encouraging it. And what is this obsession with masculinity? Well, from a very young age, we tell boys to toughen up, to be a man, to not cry, rather than encouraging the exploration of feelings and vulnerabilities, which shouldn't be cast as vulnerabilities. And this is, of course, similar for girls. Why shouldn't we allow girls the opportunity to explore more logical thinking through play and action, and rather than making them go to the aisle that's not labeled for them and making them step out of the norms? That's why, in my opinion, we need to look at the beginning. So children learning their environment and learning being socialized in this world shouldn't be restricted to a few characteristics that are deemed appropriate based on their gender. That's why, to break this cycle, this continuous cycle, one should look at the new generations and their perceptions of gender roles and gender characteristics. And this includes play. For example, an increase in gender-neutral toys and toy stores is a start in encouraging unique and individual personalities. Thank you.